Good day, dear students. How are you? I hope that you have read, understood, and listened well to our first two lessons in Global Perspectives in Psychology. Now, let's proceed to lesson number 3, Psychology in Africa. But before that, I'd like you to understand well and be clarified with the questions you have indicated in your Google form for activity number 2. Okay, the first clarification was pertaining to item number 5, and the question was the process of exemplifying the core and meta competencies in the practice of psychology is called blank. Why is that so? Okay, and the answer is the scientist practitioner process. If you could recall what I have emphasized in the orange arrow on top of the competency model, which indicates scientist practitioner process, that is the answer. And why is that so? Because psychology is a profession based on science and must be backed by science-based interventions, or what I have emphasized as evidence-based interventions, assessment, and other processes in the practice of psychology. Next, the competency model is not clear to me. Is it a process of exemplifying? Okay, the one who raised this must have assumed that the answer is the competency model for item number 5. But wait, no, it is a framework or a model, a paradigm, which summarizes the interconnectedness of core and meta competencies of psychology practice. It presents what should be and what are necessary. Okay, next. How is this effective to the present and what are its effects? Okay, it becomes a guide in ensuring that psychologists are competent, and it becomes a basis in assessing incompetence of the practitioner as well. Further, it upholds the profession and ensures effective intervention as it presents real-world practice. Next, however, the generalizability of the model is yet to be tested across the international psychology groups. Why? Not all nations adopt this, and of course, we are not requiring them, but then this has been universally made by the international organizations which I will be clarifying later on. This global level model may also be relevant to allied health practice, not just in psychology. It could be in caregiving, in nursing, and the like. Okay? Kasi very simple yung competency model na ginawa. Next. What is the difference of the first set of core competencies to the second set of core with meta? The first set focuses on the core competencies that must be manifested amongst graduates of bachelor's degree, while the second set, the core and meta, are for graduate and postgraduate degree holders. Okay, because the sample in that study, which has the output on competency model, were the graduate and postgraduate degree holders. Okay, next. What are the processes in those competencies? If you have read the additional reading assignment on competencies and the ethical standards pertaining to the Philippines, the specific processes and sub-competencies are indicated therein. Okay, for the first set of competencies, it was expounded through the additional reading assignment on competencies, while if we will contextualize it in the Philippines, the ethical standards were also given to you as your reading assignment. Okay, next. What is the difference between meta and core competencies? Okay, the core competencies are what we know as basic yet very essential combination of knowledge, attitude, skills, values, and behavior. These are the results of our studying starting in college, okay? And the meta competencies are the higher forms of competencies that go beyond basic but intertwines with the basic competencies as well. Okay, next. Are there any limitations in the provision of the ethical standards of psychology? The limitations would be depending upon the honesty and acceptance of the practitioner on what are his or her expertise. Okay, so yung sabihin natin na merong jack of all trades na alam niya lahat, pero pag na-encounter niya yung mga deep-seated and very complex na cases from the clients, at sasabihin niya kaya niya kahit hindi yun yung expertise niya, is a no-no. And of course, another limitation is that when it comes to disclosing confidentiality, it would only be broken if there is an imminent danger for the counselee himself at kung sasaktan niya ang sarili niya or yung ibang tao. Okay? That's already the limitation when it comes to ethical standards in psychology. Next, could there be differences in principles from one country to another which could jeopardize or complicate ethical values in psychology practice? Okay. When you have read the ethical standards from the PRC for the psychology practitioners here in the Philippines, you have noticed, I hope so, that you have noticed the 4 principles, namely respect for dignity, persons and peoples, competent caring for well-being, integrity, professional and scientific responsibilities to society are based on the universal declaration from these international organizations. If we say that universal declaration, this should be uniform and the same across all nations in the globe. Okay? And differences when it comes to the ethical values would be depending on the provisions on the laws promulgated in specific countries, kung meron pa bang isusupport or kung meron pa bang idadagdag or imomodify and the like. Nonetheless, the 4 principles in the psychology practice are universal across all nations. I hope that's clear. Next, let's proceed to this question. What are these acronyms all about? Okay, the International Union of Psychological Science, abbreviated in this way, or the Union, is the global umbrella organization for psychology. Okay, we should differentiate this from American Psychological Association, which is the largest. Okay, and you also could visit the link posted here so that you'll be able to know more about these international organizations. Next, the International Association of Applied Psychology is the oldest association of psychologists. Okay, the former is the global umbrella organization, while the latter is the oldest association of psychologists. Next. Okay, I hope you are already clarified with those questions from lesson number 2. Now let's proceed to lesson 3.1, Psychology in Africa. For this lesson, I'd like you to manifest the following. Differentiate the overview of education, training, scope of practice, as well as the future challenges, issues, and prospects in psychology across the various parts of Africa, I mean the Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. Okay, so let's proceed to our first topic, psychology in Kenya. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Okay, how is psychology accepted in Kenya? Did you know that traditionally there were healers, okay, which give caring interventions, and we could also identify the caring interventions as psychosocial in its nature. And from there, when psychology was introduced, they had high regard to the healers more than that of the psychology practitioners. Thus, they accepted psychology with doubt or skepticism and denial. And of course, psychology as a profession is fairly new to Kenya. But there were changes in the acceptance of psychology in Kenya when there were obvious intensified problems like corruption, AIDS, and poverty. And they also observed that there was a general inefficiency of social services system, which for us in the whole world is a very important system, okay, because it caters to the social welfare, the well-being of each person or each citizen in such country. Thus, they recognize the importance of psychology, and they also acknowledge that urgent need for psychosocial interventions from psychologists is a must. And aside from what I have discussed, which were obvious issues in Kenya, there were also results from those issues such as anxiety, depression, hysteria, paranoia, and schizophrenia, which are clinical in nature. And there were also drug and substance abuse, promiscuous sex, GBV, or what we call gender-based violence, and there were also increased rate of suicide. Next, there were also traumatic incidents, natural disasters, forced migration, terrorist attacks, tribal clashes, and wars. Okay, we could not deny that there were issues like this in Kenya, most especially the tribal clashes and wars, as well as the terrorist attacks. I hope you are knowledgeable with that. Okay, what were the actions of psychology practitioners when it comes to issues like that? They gradually, even though it was not instant, they gradually reach out to Kenyan communities in order to raise awareness of the usefulness of counseling in helping those in need cope more effectively. We know for a fact that knowledge precedes wisdom, okay? Hindi matututo or walang magiging karunungan ang mga Kenyan people kung walang nag-raise ng awareness with regard to the effectivity of our psychological interventions. And silipin natin, let's have a glimpse on the education, training, and practice for psychology practitioners in Kenya. Did you know that there were 3 groups of mental health providers in such country? First, the psychologists who have master's degree in counseling, clinical, or research, which for us in the Philippines is a must. So that will be called as registered guidance counselors or registered psychologists. Second group was the professional counselors who have bachelor's degree either in psychology or other related disciplines such as sociology, nursing, or education. Okay? But we really advocate that guidance counselors be, of course, psychology graduates as well. The third group were, of course, composed of counselors with very limited training in psychology, which we think is a root cause or a springboard for malpractice in the psychology field. We do not advocate for this. Same as true in Kenya, they advocate for the group of psychologists in number 1. Next. Most psychologists and professional counselors are concentrated in urban areas due to the opportunities that are available and the nature of their work. This makes it difficult for the majority of rural Kenyans to access mental health services from professionals when needed. Okay, this is a challenge for all of us. Let us see where we are needed, aside from what or where do we want to work in the future, especially for you, okay, as future graduates. So, ang mga mental illnesses, ang mga psychosocial problems, hindi lang naman yan nag-o-occur doon sa urban areas. Although maraming opportunities doon sa urban area, let us also recognize that most of the people in the rural area need our help. Okay? Next, the compensation or the salary for psychotherapy in Kenya is generally not quite relative to the workload in comparison to what others are paid in similar occupations. Ayan. So, parang hindi sila well compensated. Okay? Hindi nakakommensurate kumbaga yung work nila doon sa salary na nare-receive nila, which I think for now is gradually changing. I hope so. Kenya has no national, regional, or local governing body to regulate professional practice. Unlike in the Philippines, that we have the Professional Regulations Commission, and they also regulate the professional organizations like PAP. Okay? There are law and ethical guidelines, but these were put forth by organizations. So, kung merong PRC sa Kenya or kung merong national na constitution sa Kenya, it will encompass all organizations of psychology practitioners. Kasi kung organization lang ang gumawa ng ethical standards and law, then it would only be applicable to the members in such organization. Next, mental health professionals also network with human resources to assess the welfare of staff. Okay, ito yung nakikita natin ngayon across all the nations in the world na HR is really vital in the success of each organization. Some also carry out psychological research on relevant issues such as HIV/AIDS, okay, and why female genital mutilation continues to be practiced. Okay, itong female genital mutilation is not really ethical, okay, when it comes to the human right, most especially for female. Okay, dahil kung may circumcision para sa lalaki, para sa kanilang kalinisan, okay, hindi dapat ma-circumcise ang mga babae kasi wala namang aalisin dapat. Okay? And what was the action of psychology practitioner to female genital mutilation? Okay, they have responded to this practice by facilitating counseling interventions for women who have undergone the genital cut or those who fear the act and its consequences. And they also are involved in anti-female genital mutilation consciousness raising and advocacy programs within communities with the assistance of the media. We know for a fact that media is very powerful when it comes to advocacies. That's why very good ang mga psychology practitioners sa Kenya dahil they utilize the influence of the media positively. Okay? And let's have a glimpse as well with the international collaboration of Kenyan psychology practitioners. Okay, they had networks with local international agencies like that. Okay, the Kenyan Psychological Association or the KPA also collaborated with the American Psychological Association for the capacity of non-government organizations or NGOs in sub-Saharan Africa to develop, implement, and evaluate programs geared towards HIV prevention in AIDS orphans. Okay, they also recognize the role of foreign psychologists, and the Trauma Response Organization was able to carry out research on infant survivors of terrorist bomb in Kenya. So, ayan, hindi natin pinagwawalang bahala ang international collaboration because we know for a fact that psychology as a professional field will not be successful without collaboration with others or without our effective networks. So what are the ways forward for Kenya so that they'll be able to uphold psychology as an important profession? A new constitution that would guarantee the mental health and the access to mental health must be, of course, passed. Okay? The Constitution would guarantee the right of vulnerable groups that need special care and provision by identifying vulnerable groups such as women and children, physically disabled and mentally retarded persons, refugees dahil maraming wars, okay, and displaced persons, children, and unwed mothers, providing affirmative action programs for these groups and providing for the automatic national implementation of international treaties that provide for the rights of the vulnerable groups. The programs, services, and advocacies of the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and other international organizations through treaties would not be possible if there are no national laws that support its implementation. Okay, so very important din na kunin ang political will ng ating mga political leaders when it comes to support in this. Lucky and good for us here in the Philippines, the mental health law was already passed. Okay, and we're gradually ensuring the implementation of that law. Okay, so good luck to all the mental health professionals, especially for the psychology practitioners. We hope that there would be such similar law in Kenya in the future. Okay, and one consideration for Kenyan psychologists is that to integrate cultural and religious traditions in the discipline of psychology without compromising its fundamental identity or corpus of knowledge. The corpus of knowledge of psychology is that it should be science-based practice. Okay, but since we are studying the behavior of the people and their effectiveness in their human functioning, we should also consider that culture and religious traditions have a very powerful impact, okay, on their human functioning, on their success, or the otherwise. That's why it should also be considered, okay? But we should not also forget our base or our anchor as a psychology practice, okay? So to further supplement our lesson, I'd like you to read the psychosexual consequences of female genital mutilation and the impact of reconstructive surgery, rather. Okay, the link is posted here. I hope that you'll visit this, and you should also watch a video in YouTube entitled Role of Psychologists Concerned as Mental Health Issues Are on the Rise from Kenyan TV News. Okay, that's very nice because this video is pertaining the current event when it comes to mental health issues on the rise of COVID. I hope you understood well. So let's proceed to the topic number 2, psychology in Nigeria. If in Kenya there is no constitution to support and regulate the practice of psychology as the prevalent issue, and there are also doubt and skepticism in the acceptance of psychology in that country, let's have a glimpse on how psychology grows in Nigeria. So what is the status of our profession in this country? For them, psychology is relatively new, and it is equated with clairvoyance, mind reading, and spiritualism. And we know for a fact in general psychology and in, of course, basic psychology that clairvoyance, mind reading, and spiritualism are forms of pseudopsych. Pseudo, which means false, okay? And we know for a fact that psychology is a science-backed profession. So, hindi po ito part ng psych. And it is perceived irrelevant by the general population. Irrelevant kasi nga, they are not yet aware of what psychology could bring to their nation. Okay, so let's continue. There are also few psychologists in Nigeria, and one of the studies in the references that I have read is that the few psychologists is composed of 98% of male psychologists, and the other remaining percentage is, of course, female. So, mas madami ang kalalakihan. Psychology laboratories, which are very essential so that this practice would be more successful, were not provided. Okay? And the psychological practice was limited, thus there is lack of psychological services for the Nigerian nation. Next, the practice of psychology in Nigeria is, of course, more on the medical and healthcare setting, because this is one of the settings wherein our profession is needed. Why? Because in Nigeria, there are what we call diseases of civilization, such as cancer, heart disease, hypertension, mental illness. These are health problems that involve lifestyle, and we know for a fact that when there are erroneous in lifestyle, it is clearly based on psychological challenges within a person as well. And despite the prominence of psychology in healthcare and medical setting, the psychologists assigned there have a problem or an issue which pertains to their perceived inequality with medical colleagues. Okay, yan naman, nararamdaman pa rin natin, but hindi dapat tayo sumuko, okay? Because our profession is regarded as highly needed, especially in times of crisis and in the pandemic, okay? What are the impediments or, impediments or blockage to the practice of psychology in Nigeria? There is an absence of clear and established ethical guideline that would regulate the activity of psychologists. So, kung mapapansin niyo, similar ito doon sa issue doon sa Kenya. And the imported theories ought at least to have been validated and deemed appropriate for the Nigerian context. Diba? Isa ito sa mga nagpo-pertain doon sa dissatisfaction with Western psychology. Kasi nga kulang yung kumbaga theories and contextualized basis sa pag-practice ng psychology sa bawat country. And ang Nigeria, talagang lantaran niyang sinabi ito, na kung mag-a-adapt man ng Western theories ang mga Nigerian, dapat tingnan nila yung norm. Kumbaga, sa psychological test, kung valid and reliable man sa ibang country, the norming should happen. Okay? Tingnan din na i-administer ito sa Nigerian people with valid sample para makita yung norming. Okay? And let us also consider the external validity, sabi ng mga Nigerian people, okay, sa mga psychology practitioners. Next, One challenge to Nigerian psychology that has recently appeared is the introduction of Sharia law, the law of the Muslim, in some of the northern states in Nigeria. It discourages the interaction between men and women, especially if these exchanges are not formalized within the strict kinship network. As noted earlier, there are few psychologists in this nation, and these few compose of men, as I have emphasized a while ago. Restricting male or female interactions, as may be required by Sharia law, could potentially limit the delivery of much needed psychological service to a large segment of population. I hope you understood that. And you have an additional reading assignment when it comes to Sharia law so that you'll be able to understand it well and its effects to the psychology of a person. And what are the ways forward for psychology to be more successful in Kenya? The future looks bright for psychology in Nigeria based on the factors such as societal need, growing acceptance, and positive view of psychology and advances in information technology. Despite the perceived irrelevance of the psychology as a profession, gradually din naman nilang natatanggap dahil may mga issues and concerns na sa tingin nila, in-acknowledge nila na matutulungan or ma-alleviate through the presence of psychology practitioners. Areas in which psychologists are poised to make impact include the legal system, the prisons, the community development, business organizations, and responding to individual needs through private practice. Despite the challenges, despite the initial perception on the irrelevance of psychology in Nigeria, ways forward for psychology is quite positive. So for us to end our topic with regard to the psychology in Nigeria, kindly read the psychological effect of Sharia law through this link. And you should also watch the YouTube video entitled Chained Up to Cure Cough Syrup Addiction from BBC News. We have mentioned a while ago na merong substance and drug abuse, na nangyayari. Ngayon naman sa modern era doon sa Nigeria, as a substitute for drugs and marijuana, cough syrup naman ang kanilang ginagamit. So tingnan ninyo kung anong effect ng cough syrup sa well-being ng mga Nigerians, especially sa pag-restrict sa kanila and kung na-addict na sila. Bakit kaya sila chini-chain? And ano ang magiging psychological effect sa pag-chain nila sa mga tao na na-addict? So we have lots to explore when it comes to current social events. So now let's proceed to topic number 3, psychology in South Africa. We know for a fact that South Africa is already a mixture of white and black. We know for a fact that British colonized Africa, specifically South Africa. So psychology in South Africa must be part of and utilize appropriate knowledge from the international psychology community. The seeds of psychology in South Africa were possibly planted in 1916 when intelligence tests were used to identify mentally retarded students. And the issue on racial separateness influenced the thinking of psychologists and psychological associations. You research more on racial separateness, but then this is separating black from white and the breed or the mixture already. So, may effect ito You could read Uncle Tom's Cabin, for racial separateness as an additional, of course, topic para mas profound yung understanding nyo dito. Psych testing was used to provide solutions to difficult political problems such as justifying segregation on the basis of racial differences in mental test scores. And psychological tests were also used to compare the ability scores of ethnic groups, notably English and Afrikaans-speaking white. Isipin nyo na lang, Meron ba kayong mga instances wherein yung mga indigenous peoples ay na-separate from the non-IP groups? Okay? I'd like to cite an instance during my first world of work wherein I was a guidance practitioner. Then my principal advised me not to section the students homogeneously. Okay? Dapat heterogeneous. Why is that so? Kung sinabi kasi nating homogeneous, merong star section, nandito lahat yung mga magagaling. Yung mga slow learners ay nasa section D, section E, and the like. Hindi yun in-advocate ng principal ko na gawin ko. Okay? Instead, sinabi niya na dapat heterogeneous, mag-mix ang mga magagaling, mga slow learners, para mas effective, mas ma-challenge ang mga magagaling. At the same time, tingnan natin kung sino yung mga may abilidad din na tumulong sa kanilang mga kapwa. Para yung mga slow learners ay maging at par with them. Okay? Mas effective kumbaga yung learning. So, I admired my principal way back then because of that advocacy. Okay? Diba? Marami, especially sa mga private schools, nasasabihin nila na dapat ganito, yung mga matatalino nasa A, yung mga learners nasa E. No, it should not be. Okay? Same as true with the issue in South Africa. Kumbaga yung racial segregation, ethnic segregation was one of the prevalent issues na sa tingin natin ay na-involve ang psychology. Okay? With regard to the psychological test practice in South Africa, which were really questionable, the Employment Equity Act was passed, and this pertains to the employees who can be psychometrically assessed only if the tests are valid and reliable and not biased towards race of employee groups. Okay? Yun naman yung isa sa mga actions ng psychology practitioners para makabawi at may correct ang mga past na practices when it comes to psychological tests. Okay, let's have a glimpse on the education and training of psychologists. South Africa has a professional board for psychology which promotes standards of psychological education and training in such country, and they also require continuing professional development. And I'd like to share that under the Professional Regulations Commission here in the Philippines, we also have a law with regard to continuing professional development for specific professions. Okay, specifically in guidance and counseling, psychology, and the like. Why? Because we uphold, okay, the continuing professional development, that despite the earning of degree, we should continue to learn. Okay, it should be a continuous process because we believe that in continuous learning that we'll be able to uphold the profession and of course improve our service to be more effective to people. And they also identified core competencies in South Africa such as psych assessment, intervention, referral, research, project management, practice management, and the like. Okay? And we also have registered psychologists there. They have expertise on psychometrics, HIV and AIDS counseling, and trauma counseling, among others. And of course, they also considered several approaches in psychotherapy such as cognitive behavioral, humanistic, and other approaches. They also had ethical boundaries that prevent psychologists to divulge clients' data without clients' permission. Dito sa ethical boundary na ito, medyo nagkaroon ng issue between teachers and the guidance counselors kasi hindi daw naman nagiging accessible yung data ng students sa mga teachers. Okay? But then, mind you na merong limitation dito when it comes to confidentiality. Yun ay kung merong presence ng imminent danger. Kung wala naman, kailangan talaga ng permission ng client para i-share yung mga important information sa teacher. Okay? There were also private practices when it comes to psychology. Thus, psychology is not entrenched in the public sector or in the community. Okay? Naiwaras isuna kumbaga. And what are the ways forward for the practice of psychology? Researchers must include multidisciplinary collaboration, to enrich psychology and provide deeper insights into social problems facing South Africa. There remains a call for Indigenous healing practices to be integrated into health system, but psych refuse due to insufficient scientific support for the efficacy of their treatments. Okay. Doon sa psychology in Nigeria, sinabi natin na we should also recognize and integrate the cultural and religious traditions and its effects to people. Okay. Pero dito sa South Africa, medyo hindi nila ina-accept yung integration ng healing practices doon sa psychology or the contextualized psychology in South Africa. Okay, what are the ways forward for them? Psychologists acknowledge their silent complicity with apartheid and also recognize the political nature of their practice and research, but has become more involved in advocacy and social justice issues. Diba? Before, they really accepted their error when it comes to the practice of psychology kasi mas na influence ito ng politics, especially sa racial segregation. But then, they gradually corrected it and bumabawi sila. When it comes to community psychology, this should continue to be prominent in South Africa. There are new ways of approaching community issues, including community participation and research. Kaya pwede ninyong i-research yung community psychology as one of the emerging fields in our profession. So, for you to explore further resources and understand well our lesson, kindly read the Human Rights and Mental Health in Post-Apartheid doon sa ating Google, and you watch a YouTube video entitled Proposal to Include Sangomas in Psychology Courses to Decolonize the Subject by Loving Lai. Okay? It is a commentary video, but you should also understand the point of the commentator and the gist of what he is reading. Okay? So thank you so much. I hope that you have understood well. If not, I will also be posting a link in our group chat for you to also indicate your questions with regard to our lesson. Remember, the status, updates, challenges, issues, and practice of psychology in various parts of Africa differ. Nonetheless, this can be resolved at present through evaluation. And do not forget to triangulate. I-consider natin yung also culture and the notion of the people, the acceptance of such result, the development of sound and culturally sensitive resolution, the implementation of this via a multidisciplinary means, then repeat. Okay? When we say multidisciplinary, we also consider other professions that would help us address societal needs. So thank you so much. God bless, and stand by for our recorded learning session for the succeeding lessons. Thank you.